It is my great honor to welcome Sou Fujimoto at the Barbican once again for this lecture tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's really great things to come back to London because as introduced, I had a really great time at the process of the Serpentine pavilion design, and of course the exhibition design in this Barbican Center. The exhibition space is quite tough because you have a really huge columns. So, and then the fashion pieces was so subtle and small. So I tried to make the nice connection between the fashion and the space. And it was, I really remember the beautiful days of that. So today I will talk about of course, some of my works, but I brought very early works of me. It is almost like in 20th century, around the date right after my school days. At that time, I didn't have any project, so I tried to think about something really conceptual, and something could be the basics of my architecture thinking. So I brought 3 of them, and you can see how those kind of a basic fundamental conceptual thinking has been continuing to be realized in a various different way in the actual project. And I also, of course, brought those kind of the houses project, but some of the relating project, relating finished project. And then at the last part, I brought the 3 project ongoing. Unfortunately, everything is in France now, not in London yet. But now we have an office in Paris. So I'm coming to Europe almost every month or twice a month to do those kind of a project. It's a rather larger project, but still I hope kind of the deeper fundamental thinking is on there. And I like to, at the very beginning, I like to talk about my background briefly. Is this? Do you see clearly? Or can we make it a bit darker? No need? Okay. I was born in Hokkaido. It's really a nature field. So I was grown up playing around in the forest. And it was like my childhood days. And then I moved to Tokyo when I get into the university. So you can see it's quite like a messy, ugly places made by so many strange artificial things. But then now I've been in Tokyo more than the years I spent in Hokkaido. So both of them so different, so big contrast, but both of them are my background together. And that is quite like interesting to me, especially the Tokyo situation. As I will explain, the Tokyo situation influenced me a lot. And as you can see in the exhibitions, the situation in Tokyo and maybe kind of the Japanese traditional things has been kind of influencing me, or something really curious for me, because sometimes the Tokyo situation is very new for me when I came to this metropolitan city. And then I was surprised, and then I got an inspiration from that. And the Japanese traditional things also like that, because our contemporary life is so far from, for example, the Ozu films, but still something is continuing. And then sometimes we find interesting new things from past traditional things, and then get an inspiration to retranslate them into the contemporary architectures. So those kind of coming back from the tradition to the contemporary things, or like a Tokyo crazy situation to the nature field of my hometown and coming back to this, it has been like the driven energy of my architecture thinking. And then this is the first project. It is really conceptual, and it was designed in 1997, I think, to think about kind of a new concept of the house. And you can see it's simply, we can say, live in the city, or the whole city is a house. This is the map of the Tokyo, and the place where I was living around that time. It's just out of the Shinjuku area, and you can see kind of the residential areas with many, many small timber houses with such a winding small pathways going around. And the concept is very clear. You have not one completed house, but the house is fragmented, like just like a Moriyama house, but scattered throughout the whole city or neighborhood. And this is almost, I think it's from here to here, it's about 100 meter or 200 meters, something. So it's completely walking distances. And then some area you have just a dining room, and some areas, the study areas with some, I don't know what it is, or some bathrooms, or some other things. And of course, not only your own small places, but you can use the small shops or small cafes or anything you like throughout the whole city. So your life is like of course, waking up somewhere. Maybe this one is bad. I don't know. Already, it's more than 20 years ago. But woke up, for example, here, and then to take a shower here, and take to work, to think about architecture here. But important things is walking around in the city during your life. And that is based on my life at that time. I didn't have so many places. I just had one place, but small rooms. But every day, at that time, I didn't work for anybody. I didn't have anything to do, just to think about architecture. But of course, it's not possible to stay the whole day within the small rooms. So I just moved walking around those neighborhoods. And it's nice because it is like sometimes like this, small tiny house and half private, half public pathway going through, and some strange things there to get an inspirations from there. Or those kind of the small pathway. And you can see it's like a nice mixtures of the artificial things and the nature things. And small scales are surrounding you to make a cozy feelings. And in the evening, it's like this. So it's even a street. It's half protected and cozy, like architectural spaces. So that was the inspirations to think about the whole street, small pathway could be part of your house. Then you can see your house is almost like endless. But of course, during walking around, you will meet some people, and not only friends, but some other peoples. So the house is not defined by one object or one boundaries, but it's more melting into the city. So that was the very, very basic concept. And actually, at that time, those kind of a thinking was not completely new, because Toyo Ito already talked about a city of Tokyo is like a house or place of the life. And then you saw the small, like a PAO, like a small furniture-like spaces where the Sejima-san was like there on the photos. It was like the concept to live in the city without such a strong enclosures. So I was, of course, influenced by that kind of thinkings. But at the same time, I got an inspiration from my actual life, walking around in the city, small pathways. It was part of my life, and I felt it's kind of a nice, cozy feelings. So that was a very, very first, and this one is the concept. Each different color means each different house. Red house, this places, and then of course, walking pathway should be much more like almost undefined. But I just draw it in different colors. These blue guys, like this. If you have one spaces, another spaces, and then some other spaces here, then your house is really extended into the city. So because Tokyo City is those kind of a residential area is quite intimate, and then walking distances you can have almost everything. Then those kind of thinking was possible. But I try to extend the ideas of the house onto the limit, I think, where on which lines the architecture is not anymore and melting into the city, or how we can redefine the place for our dwelling. So those kind of a conceptual thinking was happening there. And the second project this is much more abstract. This is like the question about the boundaries. Again, in Tokyo, you're living in the house, small house. You open the door, then you step out onto the small corridor of your housing. The corridor is small, and then you walk down the staircase to walk onto the street, but the street is small. So finally, you couldn't say on which point you are out of your house. As I said, even the street is quite cozy, surrounded by many daily staffs of the other peoples. So the atmosphere is like you are not go out of the house, but get out of the room, but still walking some part of your house. Especially, it was a great contrast of my hometown in Hokkaido. These are really cold places with the heavy snows. So once you get out of your house, then suddenly the strong nature is there. So the contrast between inside and outside was so strong in my hometown. But in Tokyo, the climate was more mild, and then the scales between inside and outside is not so different. So that is why I was thinking, I started to question how to make such a blurring boundaries. And of course, it is from the traditional things. As you know, we have those kind of a layering in between spaces. The people calls engawa. So it's like the layers and no strong boundaries. The boundaries like a paper sliding doors or just a canopies is indicating kind of a boundaries. Sometimes those kind of a really thin frames is making the boundaries. So how we can re-understand the blurring boundaries? And then this proposal is like we don't have any strong walls. Every wall is like a really translucent skin, and then nesting them each other. So within this skin, then you have several skins, and then another skins, and deep. If you get deep inside, it gets more like isolated. But if you get out of these skins more and more, then getting more and more, outside. But no strong final boundaries for your house. So we couldn't say which one. It seems like this is like a house, but maybe this is not the house. This is part of your house. This is also another rooms, or this is another rooms, or only this part is your house, and then the neighbors is living around here. But every boundaries between your neighbors or urban situation and your private areas is just a gradations made by those kind of multiple boundaries. So that was quite like a conceptual concept. Try to re-understand what the situation in Tokyo I felt, and try to re-understand what have been in the traditional Japanese architectures. So this is quite conceptual, but still like questioning the boundaries was the theme. And then the last one for this conceptual project is this one. I'm now calling this a primitive future house. Why primitive? I try to go back to the starting point, some kind of a starting point of the architectural behaviors or the relationship of the space and your bodies. And everything is like at that time, the 35 centimeters. And then you sit on or you use the double size as a tables or shelves. So no clear functions, but you can find every different kinds of functions within the interactions between your bodies and the spaces. But this is only possible, I realize, this is only possible in the cultures where you take off your shoes and stepping onto the floors. You can see this is tatami floors, and then people sit here. This is table, but they put also the chairs, and then they put some other tables. So you have already the multiple levels, and mostly the floor is floor, but walking on it, or nobody stand on it because this is a table. But if you see those kind of multiple layers of the levels could work sometimes as a table, sometimes as stairs, or sometimes as a benches, then I felt that is quite like a simple re-understanding of the Japanese traditional systems. But could be something beyond the normal functional architectures. And this is one of the scenes of the films, Japanese films. You can see they are sitting on the floors, she's sitting on the chairs, and she's sitting on the outside. So those kind of the natural multiple layering behaviors is happening. Or sometimes, yeah, could be lying on the floors. So for us, the multiple levels as your house, once you take off the shoes, then it could be more like a flexible in a sense. So those kind of thinkings inspire me to make this house. But of course, this is quite like a strange shapes. It's far from the Japanese cleanness, but I like those kind of distances, starting from such a flexibility of the multiple levels inspired by the Japanese traditions. But finally, it is reaching to the really far from that, and then now it looks like some mysterious things, but still based or linking, anchoring onto the really basic question: how people could behave in the reaction within the spaces, or how we can find the functions in the spaces, or how we can make the multiple three-dimensional relationships or communications to each others. So everything is linking to those kind of really, really fundamental questions. So I was spending those kind of my own time without doing anything for more than 6-7 years. It was really like dreamlike days, because I didn't have to wake up in the morning, and I didn't have to submit anything for my somebody. I just was thinking, and I made something and make proposals for myself. That was the strange period, but those days made really, really basics of my architecture thinking. And then, of course, not only those 3 proposals, but I was thinking a lot of almost nothing, like messy, foolish things, and many trial, and most of them just for nothing, and only 3 of them could be surviving still now. But that's okay, I think, because you have time and you can try and errors and try and errors 100 times trying, and then if you achieve one, that's very, very precious things. But anyway, then I will talk about this house. You already understand those kind of thinking is really, really basics on this house. But actually, when I did this house, it was like an inspiration from the client. That was the starting point. The plot was very small, as you can see. It's almost like less than 6 meter and 9 meter, or more or less. And then the clients, of course, understand this is so super small plot, so normal house doesn't work. Then how to do with that? And then at the very beginning, we just chat about their lifestyle, what kind of life they do. And they said, casually, it's not like a serious talk, but casually they said they are like a nomado in the house, not in the world, but in their house. They were living in the typical apartment with dining spaces, living spaces, bedrooms, or something like that. But they said they don't care so much about the name or function of the rooms, but they just sometimes choose the one corner of the dining spaces to read some magazines, or some corners of the bedrooms to find out their places. And then I thought, wow, this is kind of a really flexible, nice way to live their life, much more, free from the plan of the houses. So I thought, anyway, this plot is quite small, so we can just give up the size of the spaces, but we can try to achieve the varieties or diversities of the areas. Then they could choose as they like. Just a small one corner, they can choose it for some purposes, and then another different corners, they could choose it. If you could have varieties, then the house for them could be much, much more rich than the size. So that was a very, very starting point. And then I thought, of course, I got these proposals, in my mind, but could be more, how to say, in a sense practical and in a sense more radical. And finally, we divided the whole spaces, whole plot in smaller pieces like this. And some of them, the smallest one is just 1.4 meter by 1.4 meter. And even the biggest one is, I believe this one is one of the biggest floor, but it's 2.5 by 2.5 or something like that. So most of the plates, it's not like a floor, it's more like most of the plates are the size of the furnitures. And then those kind of layout, vertical layout with those plates could create the potential functions from this to this distances or from this distances. And then the scales of each spaces between these plates could be also various. This part only less than 1 meter. So in a normal meaning, it is not the room. But if you are sitting inside, then you can sit like this or like this. Then it could be the place for you to be really, really protected or cozy or read books or some other things. But this place just above, it has a more than 4 meter high. Then suddenly it's the size of the plan is quite small, but the height is quite high. And the whole space is almost continuous. So from this level, the top plate, you don't see it, but the top plate here could have a 5 or 6 meter high. So those kind of the variations of the size, variations of the level differences, and variations of the spatial connections could create the huge varieties of the spaces for clients to choose in their daily life according to their feelings, according to the weathers or something, or when they have 5 people or 10 friends, then of course no one place for 10 people, but 1 or 2 people sitting here, 2 guys around here, sitting here, sitting here, sitting here, sitting here. It's like a strange 3-dimensional layout, and it's almost like everybody is climbing the trees, and one guy occupying 1 branches, and then another guy is occupying 1 branches. You can make a communication because spatially it is continuous, but your place is your own places, and you feel it's yours, and still you can have a communications. This is the model, and you will see how everything in your daily life is like a fragmented, not only the architectural pieces, but the furnitures or books or daily staffs. Yeah, you can see in the models of the art gallery. The reason why we made many, many daily staffs in the model was to show how the whole things of your life, not only the architectural spaces, the whole things of your life are creating the space or territories or atmospheres surrounding you, like a city of Tokyo, to create the scales, to create the differences, creating the varieties. And even from outside, because we made those kind of stepping levels from outside, it is not like a box anymore. It's more like a broken boxes melting into the surroundings. And that is. And then you will see how similar, in a sense, the way the city of Tokyo are created and the way the space is made. Of course, aesthetically it's so different. And I love both of them, but it is surprising to see how urban situations is really created by such a floating small pieces. So that is why I talked about even the street is quite cozy residential feelings. And this house itself is, of course, everything is small, but many floating pieces are creating your territories. In that meanings, this house is not only talking about the physical relationship of the space under your bodies, and not only talking about the functional or something beyond the function things, but also this is really relating to the urban context of Tokyo, and it's like a translation of the city of Tokyo into the buildings. So that is why it is kind of a, even from outside you will see it, and no other houses are like this, but you feel, wow, this is really like a Tokyo feelings. And this transparency is a bit too much, I feel, but the clients likes that. So sometimes the client is much more aggressive than the architects. Like a Moriyama house also, it's a really huge inspiration to the Nishizawa-san, I think. But in this case too, the first conversation inspired me to think about those multiple level houses, and those transparencies. They also talked about the openness, and we, of course, we can put some walls, and some areas, the western areas, we have more walls to block the western sunlight. But then we talked about, yeah, we could have more walls if you like. So how much you like, and we could make a good balances. But they said, no, this kind of openness is very nice, and even the bathrooms could be almost like an open. But the bathroom means showers. Not only the toilet spaces, we put it in the boxes, but we didn't show it in the models. We have the one layer of the box, the storage and the toilet and something on the very back of the houses. But anyway, so this is the intention or the meaning of this house, and it is, of course, this thinness and lightness is really strong characteristics, but this is not the lightness for lightness or lightness for the, for the expressions. If everything is so small, this is 6 centimeter, column is also 6 centimeter, because the size of the plate is already so small. If this is 15 centimeter, it's like this, and it's already too heavy. And then massive columns is making the whole impression of this kind of a soft, surrounded feelings is destroyed. So this is the concept of the space or experience of the space was there from the beginning. And then we carefully choose the materials and then the size measurement. Of course, we have to find the solutions for the structures. But still, it is like every harmony of those kind of details and size, measurement, and the relationship of different scales are very, very important. And it was funny because the timber wood window frame is like an openable window. Because this is a timber and it's quite thick, it's like this, it's much more than the 10 centimeter. So it means the window frame is much, much heavier and thicker than the main structures. And I thought it's funny because it's like a strange contradictions. Supporting structure is much thinner, and then the older elements or items are like sticked into this transparent frames. Of course, we can make these window frames much, much thinner, but I hope this could be floatings like on one beautiful object, like the bookshelves, or like these cushions, or like these bags. So that is why we make it to have more characteristics and identities on that. So those kind of every balance is making this house working. And of course, this Serpentine pavilion has like a consistent thinkings, but it's getting more like going back to the conceptual primitive future houses, but getting more and more aggressive in a sense. And at this point, it is more melting into the landscape and furnitures. So you don't see any divisions or like differences between the furnitures and the architectures and landscapes. Everything is melting together. And not only because this is just a temporary pavilion, so not the house itself, but then we can do much, much more aggressive experimental things to make a question about the boundaries. You can see how those steps is making like a landscape for people to give an inspirations to behave as they like. Or you can, she found really one cozy personal spaces, even in such an open public spaces. Those kind of slightly isolated, cozy space for one person are happening there. And of course, sometimes couples or the many people's crowded or really silent. So in every different situations, you can find your own places or new impressions, depending on the situations. And of course, those kind of translucencies and transparencies and opaqueness, how we re-understand the meaning of the walls or windows or boundaries has been really challenged. And yeah, of course, in this case, we don't have to have the really strict boundaries. The walls could be also almost like an open, but still this impression of, how to say, the dynamic, the movement of this kind of transparencies. Because if you see these directions, this surface is really transparent, but all the other surfaces, surroundings, looks like gradually getting more opaque. And if you see different directions, then the transparent areas is like a moving. The structure itself is not moving, but depending on your standing position, depending on the directions you see, the relative depth of the structure is always changing. And then the relative depth of the structure creates sometimes transparency, translucencies, and opaqueness. So the whole thing surrounds you is like a really whitey cloud-like situation, and then changing according to your movement or according to your positions. So that was kind of a really amazing experiences. Even, of course, for me as a designer, I was thinking about something amazing, but the actual experience was much, much more than that. But anyway, it was like a really like a kind of a super experimental things, but not just experimental things for the experiment, but like to stand on the fundamental question of architectures. What is the interaction of the spaces for the body, or what is the functions, or what is the meaning of the scales, different scales from a tiny 2 centimeter steel pipes to the really larger, like a Kensington Garden, Hyde Park landscaping, how we can make a transition of those kind of scales, or the transparencies and opaqueness, and then the straight orders and strong orders and the soft orders. All of those kind of questions are really anchoring onto the fundamental basics of architecture. So in that meanings, that was the moment I really made the huge effort to redefine the whole architectures. But anyway, going back to the second one, the conceptual things, the blurring the boundaries or re-questioning the boundaries. Of course, in the Serpentine, we did those kind of like a blurring boundaries. But in this house, the house N, it is more like a clearly strategically created. This is a house of 3 boxes, box and box and box houses. And a big box, or every box has many big openings. But these openings on the big box has no glass. So rain comes in and the wind blows. So inside of this big box is outside. That is why we have many trees. Then this middle box has a glass. So inside of this middle box is inside, but still outside with this small box. So if you have 3 layers of the boxes, then the definition of inside and outside is not so easily defined. It's every time it's like a relative. Inside of this big box is outside of this middle box. And inside of this middle box is outside of the small box. So inside and outside is quite relative. And it's quite close to the thinking of this. It is like a no definite outside, no definite inside. Everything is relative. But then you can have such kind of a nice in-between spaces for your life. It is like this is a diagram to show. This is a normal wall, and then you have inside and outside. It's okay. But if you have inside, outside, connected by those kind of gradient situations, then simply you can have more choice. Deep inside, if you like to be isolated, you can get in more and deep inside. And then if the weather is fine, then you are almost like here, but still slightly within the territory of your house. And then those kind of in-between situations, you can choose depending on your feelings or depending on the weathers or depending on how many people you are. So those kind of the meaning of the gradations is you can achieve more choices where to sit or where to place yourself. And again, this is like a traditional layers of the houses. This one space, another space, and then the gardens. So what is the meaning of this space? Sometimes could be the circulations, and sometimes could be like the extended living spaces, or sometimes it's just like the benches for the gardens. So those kind of flexibilities of the meaning of those every gradation layers is the key of this project. But of course, we couldn't make we couldn't repeat those traditional houses because, as you can see, they have a paper walls, and then it's almost like impossible to live in there. So I like to create a nice translations and reinventing those traditional things in our contemporary life. And finally, it was like this: just a simple 3 boxes. Big box, middle box, and small box. This is a plan. And around here is outside. And then section is also like this. This section is really amazing, I think, because normally this big box is not necessary. You can live within this box. But if you have this big box, then, of course, the garden is here, but the garden is part of your room, larger room in a sense, but really open, larger rooms. And this inner room is also not so necessary. But if you have those kind of 3 layers, then you can have amazing feelings of the varieties in your house. And this is a view. And you could see how the Japanese traditional housing areas are creating, for example, this is not in Tokyo. In Tokyo, we have much more small places, but this is not the Tokyo. And then they have the space for house, for example, and the garden. And then the clients also had those kind of houses, garden and a house, and they renew it. So we propose, okay, the house, garden, it's okay. But if you enclose everything with one more skin, then you can feel your gardens more within your territory. Sometimes the garden itself is part of the a larger or largest living spaces. And if you like to get more, protected, then you have 2-3 layers to protect you from outside. And this is a view from the outer layers, already enclosed by the big box with many openings with trees, because this is outside. And then you see the second box and the third box inside. This is a view from the smallest box. And yeah, you can see how, because this is a small box, and then many openings, and middle box, this one, and many openings, and then the big box is this one, with many openings. So finally, you are inside with the 3 layers of the concrete boxes, really protected. But at the same time, you have many openings, and openings is layering complexly each other. Finally, if you look up, you see more than 10 fragmented skies is covering you. So it's quite like open feelings, even within the 3 layers of the boxes. So those kind of the coexistence of protected feelings and an openness together is the really magical things of this house. Because anyway, the fundamental meaning of the house is protect you, but at the same time open you to the surroundings. Because you couldn't live in the concrete box without any windows. So to make a nice communication to the natures, to make a nice communication to the neighborhood is a very, very important part. But at the same time, like a nice protections, nice territory feelings, cozy protected feelings is very, very important. So in this house, we have like a kind of a really amazing balances. And then you can choose those balances. How deep you are protecting or how open you expose yourself to the surroundings. Get closer to the natures, get closer to the weathers, or really, really protected alongside one of the walls, something like that. So transparent, yeah, we can say transparencies and opaqueness are now melting to each other. Depending on the positions you stay, then this whole space gets really, really transparent, or gets really, really opaque, or in between situations. And then you can choose in your life how much transparencies and opaqueness is you needed. And again, this is a space inside of the big box, but outside of the middle box. So it is outside. And those layout of the openings is carefully designed to not too open to the street and not too open to show neighbors' houses, but taking in the neighbors' green, this is the neighbors' greens, and then to open to the skies. And those kind of how to say, the treatment of the boundaries is quite fundamental. So in a sense, this house has no plan in a sense, just a box and box and box. No plans. We just design the boundaries. But if you design the boundaries, then the whole space for your life could emerge from that. And of course, we can say the concrete box is making your house. But at the same time, we can say the thickness of the air is making your house. The wall is not just an object as a concrete, but the thickness of the air is making your wall. And then the air and then openness and closeness is really, really like dynamically changeable. So in that sense, this is like really close to the traditional Japanese house, but at the same time really questioning not only the Japanese traditions, but the whole like a fundamental question of the architecture or dwellings, how to open it and how to close it is relating to this. And I'd like to show also, talking about the boundaries, I'd like to show this project too. It's also really like a funny project. Yeah, this is a public toilet, minimum public toilet in Japan, in the middle of the countryside. And when I get the commission of this by telephone, I was so excited because they said, wow, this is just a small things. So I'm not sure you can get it. You like to get it. Well, what is that? And they said the public toilet. Wow, this is, and how many toilet? Only one? That is kind of a extreme like situations. And the public toilet is quite interesting. I have been thinking public toilet is very, very interesting programs because it's public, but once you are inside, it's really private. So how to do with the publicness and privateness, those kind of opposite things could be integrated by architectural intelligence. And of course, the site is countryside neighborhood, then it's nice to open your view. But at the same time, of course, you need to be protected from the other views. So then how to open and then how to close, this is also quite fundamental questions. And then the nature and architecture things there. So those kind of a really fundamental questioning of architecture is here in the smallest public toilet. So I thought about that and wow, this is exciting, so I like to do it. Then we started. And finally we made it like this. It's almost like a funny joke, but I was serious. I'm serious now still. Toilet, glass box, and then we designed this black walls. Black wall is like this. So it's like an oval shape, and 2.5 meter high, and you have a door. And once you come in, you can lock the door here. So that is the important point. Once you lock the door, then it's like your public garden. And even the glass box toilet is okay because it's already the view from around surroundings is blocked by these black walls. But still, you can have really nice view from inside. So it's like a nice but intelligent, I have to say, intelligent treatment of the boundaries. This is the plan. Glass box, and then the black wall like this. And then this is the door. You can lock it. It is like a simple treatment, how we understand the walls. Normally the wall is blocking the view and blocking the air at one time. But if you can separate the meaning of the wall, blocking only the view, blocking only the air, then this black wall is only blocking the view. So the air is continuing. And this glass wall is only blocking the air to make a minimal shelter for the rainy days or something, but not blocking the view. So you can have the view. And then the important point is to make a distances, like the previous project. The 3 layers of the boxes, box and box and box, but it has a distances. Then you can have a spaces. In this case too, the functionally different walls could have a distances, and then those kind of impossible requirement to block the view, but to enjoy the view to the surroundings, or to make it public, but should be really private. Those kind of contradictions could be solved by such an intellectual method. And then finally, it's built, and it works very well. Of course, sometimes if you are really emergency situations, it's a bit tough because you finally reach to the door and then you open the door and then you still have a 15 meter to run. But most of the situation, it works. And we keep the existing trees and we put this garden as much, as natural as possible, not too much fancy things, to make a nice continuity from surroundings. But it is like a really public toilet. And then it was done 5 years ago and it's still there. But it was for like art. The city itself is like promoting themselves by art and architecture. So that is why they asked me to design the small toilet. But then every year they do like an art event in the springtime. And then the first year, because of those kind of a crazy toilet, it was like this place was getting really popular somehow. And then many people coming using the huge bus, not only one bus, but the 2-3 buses, touristic buses coming here, parking behind the walls, and then make a long queue, not for toilet, just to take our photos, sit inside and take our photos or selfies or something, like a touristic place. And it was of course nice, and city people were so happy. But then sometimes some of the people just on the bus and then next destination is a toilet and something. Some people thought, well, okay, next to the toilet, so I like to do the toilet. Arriving here, and actually it's toilet, but long queue only for the photo shooting, so couldn't do any toilet. And they get a bit angry because this should be the toilet, but they couldn't do toilet. What is that? And they complained to the government, the local government. That was kind of the city government people, wow, that's a big problem. How to do with that? And finally, they found out the solutions to put the mobile toilet, temporary mobile toilet out of these walls. for the actual use of the toilet. So yeah, finally, the first time in the history, they put the toilet for the toilet. Things happen. But anyway, it is, yeah, it is funny, but it's happened and it is working. But architecturally, it is really seriously intellectual project, I have to say. And also, this library is like the boundary things. This library is made by the bookshelves. Everything is bookshelves. This is for Art University in Tokyo. And the bookshelf is like a spiral to grow, to have the places for people. But finally, it is like this 6,000 square meter library made only by one continuous bookshelves. But the important point is it has many, many openings again, like the house N, the box and box and box house. Because with these openings, you will see the next spaces, like a layering. And I thought, of course, the library is really should be functional spaces to find books, to read books. But at the same time, personally, I felt the library could be the space where people can just meandering, walking around like in the forest for unexpected encounter with unknown books or to get some unexpected ideas or something like that. So it is like on one hand, it's a super functional libraries, but on the other hand, almost like something beyond the functions or no function places for your imaginations. And how to integrate both of them were the very, very interesting topic for me. I thought about the forest of books where you can walking around. And then those kind of a layering of the bookshelves with many, many openings, I thought it is making, you can see the space behind it or behind it, but you couldn't see everything. Only limited areas is visible. Then you understand something behind it, but you don't know what it is. And then it makes like the curiosities, invitations, and expectations, and then you start to walk around. But once you step into the another space, then you see the another layers, and almost endless layers. And those kind of like endless imagining curiosities or expectations could lead you almost endlessly walking around like a forest. Because in the forest, you feel the forest is spreading, but you don't know what is happening there or behind these trees. That is why you're walking around. So those kind of the sequence of the curiosities should be created by those layering systems. And then this is the model, 1 to 20 model. It's a very huge model. And functionally, of course, it should be the layout of the books is quite like a systematic. This is a central counter. And then it's like a clock. Each category is making those kind of a layout. And then you quickly understand if you look for the books for art, then these directions is the art books. And then you start to follow to that. Or the literatures or architectures or something. Everything is really, really well organized. But still, it's like a labyrinth. So if you don't care so much about the categories of the books, then you quickly start to be lost in the spaces in a positive meanings. And then finally it's made. So it is like not dealing the boundaries inside and outside, but it's almost like endless boundaries. No outside, no inside, but it's like a relative boundaries inside here and there. But if you are there, then there and over there is happening. And the ceiling is really nicely done by the really cheap polycarbonate materials to make a beautiful contrast of this timber bookshelves and natural light and almost like a phenomenal existence of the surfaces. And you will see how the space is spiral, so it's like a vanishing, and then the layering is making this space, another space, another spaces. And sometimes they sleep. They are students, so they sleep. But yeah, I like this photo very much because she is representing how comfortable this space is. And seriously, I like to say those kind of comfortable feelings is made by this system of the spiral, because the space between those two walls are almost like a 4 meter something. So it's rather like a residential, cozy scales, cozy feelings. But on the other hand, if you are standing in the middle of this spiral, you will see almost like a vast, endlessly spreading the whole spaces of the 3,000-4,000 square meters. And then the coexistence of these cozy feelings and then endless feelings is created by the one simple system of the spiral walls with many, many openings. So those kind of like almost like an impossible coexistence is like an amazing point of the architecture design. You can make the both of them simultaneously, but you have to think about how to make it. And then at the same time, those kind of endless feelings is also like an amazing point of the architecture design, because every architecture should have the limitation of the size and the boundaries and the plot. But your experience could be more than that. You don't see which wall is the last wall. So you don't see the size of the spaces. You feel this space is almost like a spreading 10 times or 100 times more or like that. And if you're walking around, then the relative perception of the space is always changing. So you don't have to understand the boundaries, but you can just enjoy the meandering in this house, in this library. So in that sense, I think the amazing point of the architecture design is like that. You can go beyond the physical existence. Even the house NA, the box and box and box house, it is like sometimes you feel the sky itself is really, really far away, but the big box, the ceiling of the big box is also really, really high. Actual size is 7.5 meter, but at some situations, you don't see the distances because it's a white surface and less details. So you feel, wow, this ceiling is almost like the height of the sky or something. So those kind of perceptions or experiences beyond the physical existence is possible in architectural design. So I was talking about 3 conceptual things and some of the realizations, but I'm sorry, I ran a lot of times, but I like to show 3 more projects ongoing. Everything is relating to those of them. This is the École Polytechnique, the engineering university in Paris. And this is the interior view. And the project was the competitions, and they request not only the classical education system of the classrooms, but they like to have something new learning things. Then we proposed those kind of a multiple layering of the floating platforms and big staircases and many like small corridors where students can unexpectedly start their chat or starts their presentations or a small workshop or something like that. Those kind of accidental coexistence or co-happening many different things could make the inter-inspirations to each other's, or you just pass by some discussions and then you can easily join. So those kind of dynamic relationships of each different event could be one of the way of the new learning, we thought. Then we proposed those kind of the many platforms. And it is, you can see really close to the concept of this house. The scale is so different and much more complex, but still the basic concept is continuous. This is a diagram to show floating platforms. It's like a small forest with many branches. You can occupy some areas doing some discussions, some other people doing the presentations, or just doing the sketches or something like that. But you can make the visual connections, or you can hear, you can listen something. So those kind of a dynamic relationships could be done by those kind of a three-dimensional layout of the floating platforms. So that was a very, very basic concept. And this diagrams below is more getting to reality because they request many classrooms. So this is the classrooms. Corridors, more open areas, and then starts to make it more like a, how to say, random. And then we have more trees, even inside we have trees. So it's almost like a melting into the forest. And in the forest, you can be more dynamically communicating. So this is the actual sections. It's almost, conceptually it's the same things is happening. From outside, it's like this. But you will see how they need so many normal classrooms. So we put it there. And then we proposed those kind of circulation areas. All the circulation areas is like the floating platforms and the flying catwalks, and then the big staircases like the floating auditorium like things. And then again, vertical relationships, horizontal relationships is happening like this. And this is now the last phase of the design. And hopefully we can start construction within this year. So size is almost like a 10,000 square meters. So much, not only 10 times, but the more, much more, almost 100 times or something. But still, how to think about the relationships of the peoples, or how to think about the spatial layout, and then people's experiences could be related. In that sense, the different scales and different programs, but still we can think about the continuity or consistency of the concept. And this is the housing project in France too, in south of France. And it's like a crazy monster of the balconies. And like this, because this is the south of France. So the weather is so different, and it's warm climate, and even the winter time they could have a lunch on the outdoor terrace. That is something so different from, for example, Tokyo situations. So I try to imagine what is the life on those kind of really nice areas. And then finally we thought, wow, the huge terrace should be there. But how to do it? And finally we put the huge terraces on the apartment. That's quite really, really simple, but it works. This is like this alongside the river, and 50-meter high and 105 apartment is there. This is the plan. Site is like this. So we just simply respect the green belt going through the site like this. So we push the buildings more onto the roundabout. And we try to respect the view of these existing buildings as much as possible. So we push this angle in and something. Finally, we achieve those kind of a strange shape. And we didn't know how to do with this strange shape. But if we get an idea as to put the huge balconies all around these volumes, then it is, of course, it's quite like a normal typology, apartment with the balconies. But if you have the proper shape, and if you have the strange proportion of the huge balconies going all around, then based on such a normal typologies, but something really different, something really new could happen. That is the point I love this project very much, because it's quite normal, but it's quite extraordinary things. It's quite anchoring to the fundamental things, typologies, that it is something different. And you can see sometimes the apartment is a duplex, the 2 levels, and the balcony itself is 2 level like this, connected by the staircase. So it's really like a 3-dimensional living environment. And I don't know how my former works are affecting influences on this project, but you can see after the completion, this is now under construction, but after the completion, building itself is very beautiful, I could say. But the much more beautiful things is the life is coming out onto these terraces, parasols and something, furnitures, and all of those kind of daily stuffs, the stuffs of the lives are covering these architectures. And then finally, the architecture is stepping behind, and then all those kind of three-dimensional high-rise filled with a life could be there. And that is the point really amazing things could happen. It's like the Tokyo street. The street itself is just one line, but you have many, many things coming out, like a life is coming out. And finally, it is making the living environment. So in that sense, I feel there is something consistent. And here, I really like to respect the local conditions, the climate and cultural background and their lifestyle. So based on such a local conditions, it was something new for me. Try to get an inspiration from that kind of new things, try to understand it, and try to translate it into the architectural forms. So those kind of attitude was very, very same. When I came to Tokyo, I was surprised, but I didn't want to say I don't like Tokyo or this is crazy. But I was curious. I like to understand. I like to respect, and then I could have something for me to retranslate it into the architecture things. So those kind of a basic attitude is here, I think. So this is the last one. In Paris, in French, this means 1,000 trees. And it's like a floating forest above Paris. And it's so crazy shape, crazy concept, but we won the competition. Finally, against the Rem Koolhaas and the 3XN and such a great architects. Because, I don't know the reason, maybe many, many reasons, but of course I said I love Paris very much and something at the presentation. Anyway, yeah, this is on the highway, sorry. It's on the very important locations. This is Champs-Élysées, Louvre, and La Défense, and then this is the ring highways. And then this is a crossing point with our plot. And so you can see it's on the highway. But the important point was this is on the edge, but this is actually in the Paris. So how we propose some new things in Paris, that was a big challenge. And as you know, the city of Paris has like the height limitation of the 30 meters, 35 meters. So mostly it's like this, continuously the low volumes. Sometimes Eiffel Towers or something is sticking out, but mostly it's like this. And then our site also has a height limitations. So we thought, if we have floating forests just above those kind of height limitations, then it could be really like responding to the city of Paris structures, but really new things. And if you have not only the forest, but the floating villages on there, then some really crazy new lifestyle could happen, we thought. So that was the really starting point of the proposals. On the rooftop, we have the forest with many, many houses. And I didn't intend to make it like a Japanese houses, but it's kind of something between. But independent houses was important because most of the Paris house is an apartment, the big volumes. So we try to put the counterpart, different things from Paris to make existing Paris beautiful and then to make our proposals beautiful. So different things together to make both of them like a shining again. Normal Paris apartment, typical Paris apartment, open the bottom to make a public forest, and then transform the upper part into the forest-like villages. Because, you know, the Paris rooftop is really, really like harmonized but diverse. So like to respond to that by the different materials. Harmonized but diverse by the forest, floating forest, and the villages. It's like this. So it's almost like a full greens. And we also like to make, Paris, city of Paris is like the city of monument. The Louvre pyramids, the Concorde, and then the Arch of Triumph, and then the new arch. So we propose to make the new monument, but not made by the artificial materials, made by the natures. That could be also like a respecting the Paris, understanding the history of the Paris, but try to bring the counterpart to make both of them more shining. This is the model. So then you will see how the floating forest is floating. We have the office, hotel, housing, and commercial, kindergartens, and the bus stations on the ground. So it's really like a mixed-use programs. And it's huge, 60,000 square meters. So it's kind of a new scales for us, and the new locations, and really deeply involved into the city of Paris. But again, I like to do those kind of a really basic attitude for the local situations and for architectures. Try to understand, try to respect what they have, but try to re-understand it to make the new proposals on it. And this is also ongoing. And we will very soon, we will submit the permission drawings. And of course, this is huge, so it takes time to finish it. But it is like, for me, the different scales, different cultural background, different situations, different context. Every time it reminds me the day I moved to Tokyo. It was something new, but it's like a really positively surprising places. And then, if you encounter with something new, then everything is inspiring. Your brain starts to work a lot and a lot and a lot. Then try to re-understand it, try to question it, re-questioning it. And finally, you can make your own reinvention or your own retranslations of those kind of really, really basic things to make something new. So I feel scales, styles, everything is different, but still it is continuing and it's ongoing. Anyway, thank you very much. Thank you very much. That's it. That's it. Sorry, yeah, I talked a lot, but if possible, I like to have several questions and answers.
Hello. Thank you very much for the lecture, first of all. You said the important and interesting part of Japanese architecture for you is the blurriness of the boundary. And can you tell us more about what you think is important in Western, especially French architecture, please? Thank you.
Wow. Actually, the climate-wise, for example, in London is much, much colder than Japan and Paris also. But it's not like the warm weather or the cold weather. But if you have, for example, the layers, then sometimes you can choose, if the weather is nice, then you can go get more outerwards. And then if you like to be concentrating on something, or if you like to be alone, then you can just get inside. So those kind of the layering is not only relating to the weather conditions, but I feel it's more like relating to the fundamental aspects of the human life or human society, because we are individual, but we need the society to make communications. But we don't want to make the communications 24 hours every day. Sometimes you like to be alone, sometimes you like to be open. And then those kind of gradations or blurring boundaries is making more delicate situations, delicate gradations between the really, really outside and really, really inside. Of course, you can. It's could be enough. You have just one bedroom, and then one door. Could be okay, but yeah, I feel we could have more richness of our life by the gradient boundaries. So that is the reason I am interested in that.
Thank you.
And also, for example, in Spain or in such areas, they already have like such a open loggia-like things or open corridor-like things or something like that. So it is not only from Japan, not only from Asian countries, but from all over the world. We have been like inventing the spaces or method to enjoy those kind of the varieties of the communications or varieties to enjoy the natures and surroundings.
Hello, thanks for the lecture. And we are actually architects in London, and we are faced with a lot of climatic situation like very bad weather and rain and all that stuff. But that's why we really appreciate your architecture, which is very open and blurring the boundary itself. If you were given a project in North Pole, or let's say maybe Hokkaido back in your hometown, how would you play with your concept of blurring boundary?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, actually, I'm from such a really tough area, sometimes getting minus 30 degrees Celsius. And so my really background is like that. And then, but in summertime, it's really beautiful, not too hot as Tokyo. So I like to try to make those kind of the layering boundaries, because it is working. Because if you have 3-4 layers, then really, really inside is really warm without any strong installations, because each layer is blocking the airs. And in summertime, you can make it everything is open, so the wind is going through it. So it's like the ranges. The intention is to make more wider or various ranges to make a communication with the climate, to make a communication with the weather. So blocking, really, really hardly blocking. But on the other hand, if you like to make it open, and really, really open, so it's not like just one strong walls to control everything. And the basic attitude behind it is, anyway, it's nice to enjoy the natures, not to block the natures, not to control the natures, but to have the communications. If it snows, then it's nice to see the snows, but at the same time, to have such kind of a freshness of the snows is also nice. And really sunny days is getting the really, really cold because all the hot things is going away. In my memory, that is really one of the beautiful moments. Really, the air is so clean, and then so cold, so fresh, but still you feel it. So I feel the nature is not the enemy. It's more like the things which makes our life much, much richer, I think.
Hey, my name's Kevin. Thank you for your time. This is probably not the best way to start a question, but I don't think my question is a clear answer. But I just wanted your personal take on what you thought, why it is. I was thinking, in the current world of architecture, there are so many famous Japanese architects, and I thought it was just in my head, but I was just Googling Taro Ando, Toyoito, Sana, Izazaki, King Akuma. Just the list goes on. Household names of Japanese world architecture. What do you think is what made you guys so successful? This generation of architecture that everyone knows. I really couldn't think of any other. Again, it could be my personal perception, but I couldn't think of any other countries that's kind of come close to this kind of impact you guys had in the current world.
So your question is why the Japanese architecture is so successful?
Yes.
But yeah, in a sense, they are very good. For example, from Kenzo Tange and Shinohara, Toyo Ito, and everybody, Maki, Kurokawa, yeah, they are so great. And then Toyo Ito, Sana, really amazing. And I don't know why they are so great. I like to know. But yeah, because they are so different in a sense. Maybe you can say some of the similarities, but from my viewpoint, from inside, they are so different. And for example, Kengo Kuma, Sana, Shigeru Ban, so different. But still, they are really successful in architecture. It's really surprising. And I don't know, I like to know. Yeah.
I thought that might be your answer.
I think the answer to that is there was a lot of money after the Second World War poured into Japan, and also the new architects who were being trained had none of the restrictions we have to put up with in Europe particularly. I don't think many of those buildings you showed at the beginning would have passed building regs. That kills us in some respects. So it gives you freedom.
So you mean you feel Japanese architectural situation is full of freedom?
Definitely
then
more.
You feel that is the reason the Japanese architects can make such a crazy things.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think. But of course, as you know, in Japan too, we have the regulations, rather strict regulations, because the Japanese people is really strict. But as a style-wise, it's not so restricted. You can make something crazy next to the normal house, because in Paris it's impossible. But yeah, we are making crazy things, but still, like, it's something different. But and of course, the economical boom was there, and after the war, we have to make something to recreate our country. So those kind of efforts of the generation, upper generation, I really admire. But after, for example, 80s or 90s, economically we are getting down. After the crisis in Japan, we are getting down, and we suffered some earthquakes and something. And so, I don't know, we are still struggling something, but maybe, and of course, as you know, of course, this is a Japanese house exhibition, but 99% of the Japanese house is really like a normal mass production houses or just a boring houses. If you come to Japan, you will see most of the houses just nothing, and only 1% houses is like such a small experiment. Because the situation is limited, the plot is small, so you cannot make a normal house. Then you start to think how to at least could realize the minimal living environment, or how to achieve more richness of your life. Maybe different from a normal meaning of the richness of a life, but could be because we could have the various different way of live. So those kind of a small trial to go through the difficulties could make us to find out some other solutions from the normal houses. That is actually that works very well, at least for me, and many of the houses exhibited had such kind of the restrictions, not by the regulations, but the site conditions or something. Then try to go beyond that. Those kind of effort made the quality, I think.
Thank you. Thank you.
One last question.
Thank you for the wonderful lecture. I was wondering, because I've visited one of your projects in Tokyo, the Tokyo apartment, and I really like the project. And I was reading another book. Maybe you have mentioned that the relationship between the house and the city in the first conceptual project of yours, and then the later you mentioned it. You keep saying this relationship, and I remember one of your projects in Taiwan, 7-Eleven as home, or home as 7-Eleven. Maybe you've done the project with other people together. So I found it very inspiring, and I wonder if you can speak a little bit more about this urban dwelling. And in the case, especially when you have this background in nature, and because urban dwelling, especially complex urban dwelling, is a little bit like making everybody a little bit stressful. So maybe you can say a little bit more about this kind of relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I didn't show Tokyo apartment today, and because I have many things to show. Not because I don't like it, but it's a bit crazy project. It's like a stacked houses. Each house is small, but the stacked houses. And at that time, I was, as you said, I was thinking about my understanding or my ideas of the relationship between the architecture and the city is not so should not be so separated. So try to create some kind of the vertical villages, but in a strange way. And not only stacking houses is important, but for me, it's important to have the staircases as a vertical pathway to go through the houses, because normally the pathway is horizontal or just sloping. But if you are walking in Tokyo, you can almost imagine this strange pathway could be three-dimensional and then create a really layering city of something like that. So that was the starting point of the imagination to make those kind of a crazy house. And still I'm because as you can see, the first sketch of the integration of the small scattered rooms in the city, and then your activities to walk around is connecting and completing their house, or almost like no completions. It's like a ongoing process house. That is, really fundamental, but quite difficult to. It's directed translation is maybe possible, but I like to keep it a little bit more in my mind to make something. But for me, the urban situations, like in Tokyo, and the forest, like this, is both of them. I said the background for me, because I felt really strange similarities. The materials is different, but in the forest, you feel small branches, small tree leaves, or middle-sized trunks softly surrounding you to create your cozy territories, protecting you. But still, it's not closed. The space is open, so you can walk around as you like. So those kind of protected feelings and openness is very, very, fundamental, I think, for architecture design. And in Tokyo, sometimes you feel the similar things. Every materials, even every element is ugly, artificial, but still the scales and then how those guys are surrounding you are really like similar to the small forest to create your territories. And still you can choose your own way to walking around. So it's not closed, it's not locked. So those kind of the similarities was the things I gradually developed throughout the learning architecture and then walking around the city without anything, without nothing. And slowly, I try to develop the understanding of the Tokyo situation and my hometown situations to make the basics of my architecture thinking. So it is still there in my mind and waiting for some kind of a nice realizations, or waiting for the moment which is the ideas could be changed in a sense. In Paris, the massive volumes, but still the kind of the understanding of the urban situation and the architectures and the natures are there, but the different way of the translations is happening. So it is like it's really, really deeply anchoring to my background. And so it is still there, it will be there, and it's like an endless source of the inspirations, I think.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.